Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Tuesday, August 24th, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are made available absolutely free by Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that page and click on the red and white bullseye, or the link in the upper left-hand corner that says Start Here, it'll take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? That chapter of the book contains a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. It's called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 17 years to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each one of us has been gifted. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. No need to even add an email address. Just click on the PDF file, download it, print it off, and use it as often as you'd like. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through the use of that tool and or given powerful testimonials about how the application of that tool has positively affected their lives. You can also download at your app store, type in the 3 words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, and before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you will see the glowing heart icon, and if you tap on that, it'll give you access to a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do that soon and often. And then give us a call at 563-999-3581, and we can have a conversation, or we can hear your testimonial, or we can step you through a worksheet process. We're also doing the Course in Miracles lessons this year, and we're on the workbook lessons. Today is the 236th day of the year. Lesson 236 in the workbook of Course in Miracles reads, I rule my mind, which I alone must rule. The commentary reads, I have a kingdom I must rule. At times it does not seem I am its king at all. It seems to triumph over me and tell me what to think and what to do and feel. And yet it has been given to me to serve whatever purpose I perceive in it. My mind can only serve. So today, I give its service to the Holy Spirit to employ it as He sees fit. I thus direct my mind, which I alone can rule, and thus I set it free to do the will of the Creator. Father, my mind is open to your thoughts and closed today to every thought but yours. I rule my mind and offer it to you. Accept my gift, for it is yours to me. And Pam Grout, in her Course in Miracles experiment book, Lesson 236, is titled, Who Rules the Kingdom of Your Mind? She quotes Horace as saying, Rule your mind, or it will rule you. Pam writes, Deranged people circle the kingdom walls, shouting, The sky is falling. Town criers preach despair. An airplane flies overhead with a banner, Danger, danger, take cover. But there's also a dot, and there's also a bigger story going on. Lesson 236, I rule my mind, which I alone must rule, says I'm the one in charge. Letting my mind's kingdom fall prey to anguish is a scary rabbit hole. For me, It is an indefensible way to live, which is why in the kingdom of my mind, I frequently pose this question, quote, and what else is true, close quotes. When the drums of distress start reverberating throughout the kingdom, it's time, for me at least, to get up, look around, and see what else is happening. Listening for the beat of love beneath the dominant melody enables me to rule the precious kingdom of my mind. Listening for the beat of love, always there beneath the dominant melody enables me to rule the precious kingdom of my mind. So that's our Course in Miracles lesson and the Course in Miracles experiment chapter for today. And we have time for conversation. We've got about 50 minutes. Our call-in number is 563-999-3581. If you sense, and Parkinson's is a particularly disruptive disease. It ends people's lives early. It steals from them the ability to function well, ride a bike, play with their kids, walk, be at peace in the world physically. And so the new drug that they thought might be beneficial was a rather drastic thing where they drill a hole in the skull and they precisely inject the medication directly into the part of the brain that they think is going to be responsible for creating the problems with Parkinson's and therefore healing the problem with Parkinson's. Now, you might imagine that it would be rather difficult to create a placebo effect, but they did it. And it's a double-blind study. Double-blind study means that the patient who gets the treatment and the doctor who's treating the patient, neither one of them know, did the patient get the actual treatment or did they get a placebo, something that has no scientific basis for causing change in the body. Well, if you're drilling a hole in the person's head and injecting the medication deep into the brain, how can you have some people think they've got that but actually get nothing? Well, the people in the operating room know, but the doctor working with the patient doesn't know, and the patient, his or herself, doesn't know. And what they do for the placebo group is they drill not all the way through the skull, but they drill into the bone to cause an indentation, and then they sew it back up, and they have the person be anesthetized for the same length of time they would if they were getting the actual treatment of, slicing the scalp, drilling a hole through the brain, and then injecting the medication deep in the brain. And he talks about this study because there was a gentleman, relatively young man, who had a young son, and his Parkinson's came on very strong and made it so he couldn't ride a bike, he couldn't run, he couldn't play ball with his son. And so he volunteered for the study, anything. If they've got a new medicine that's going to help cure Parkinson's, I want to try it. So he volunteered for the study, and as time progressed, both he and his doctor were so excited because they thought, this is amazing. They have found the cure for Parkinson's. This guy got so much better. He got so much more mobile. He was able to play with his son. He was able to play catch, ride a bike, run. And they were just thrilled. And, of course, the time passes, and he just keeps getting better to a certain point, and they think he's cured. So they're not only happy for him, but they're also excited because they think, hey, they found a cure for Parkinson's. This is going to, help people all over the world. But when the study ends, part of the rules are that they have to let everybody involved in the study know whether they got the actual medication or treatment or they were in the placebo group. And much to everyone's surprise, when the study was over, they told this gentleman and his doctor that he was in the placebo group. Now, the good news is that both this gentleman and the doctor had a good head on their shoulders and said, wait a minute. After the initial shock, the patient said, well, I don't really care why I got better or how I get better. I'm better. I'm not going back. And so his doctor supported him and, doing all the right things and believing that he was, at least in remission, if not cured, and there's no reason to think it's going to come back. And so he went on with his life. That's a story about the placebo effect. That's how our brains can do wonderful healing things for us when we believe they can and when we believe we can get better. The nocebo effect is demonstrated in a number of ways. One of them is the work of Dr. John Sarno, but it's also demonstrated in this Parkinson's study. Because in this Parkinson's double-blind study, not only did some people feel like they got cured of Parkinson's, which when they got the placebo, but the vast majority of people who got the placebo effect, those people reported more negative side effects than the people who actually got the medication. That's the nocebo effect. That's their brain tricking them into thinking they had this invasive brain treatment with this powerful chemical, and so they created the experience of a variety of negative effects like dizziness and nausea and shakiness, etc. So that's how powerful our minds are for either good or ill. Dr. Michael Ryce likes to tell the story of a young man who was in his intensive center at Heartland, and he was dreading his parents coming, and he kept saying, my parents are such a pain in my butt. Parents arrived for a visit, and that day, that young man got a severe case of hemorrhoids. And they were there for however long, 4 or 5 days or whatever, and the day after his parents left, his hemorrhoids went away. So this is an example of my mind energy creating a physical problem in my body. This is what Louise Hay's body of work on Heal Your Life and some of her other books is all about, recognizing there's a literal and there's a metaphoric impact of our negative thoughts. And if we really want to be more proactive in improving our lives and having a better life, we can, but we need to do what this lesson from Course in Miracles is talking about. We need to rule our mind. We need to turn it over to the positive. We need to ask to be shown what's the most effective positive use of my mind energy today, whether it's my thoughts or my emotions or both. And so, I'm on this topic today because I've had 2 patients already in my office this morning who have had very intense life experiences that verify what Eric Vance writes about in this book, what is documented in the research. Our minds are not separate from our bodies. And when we allow our minds to go into the negative, when we allow ourselves to get programmed, and we believe that we're helpless and hopeless, then it impacts our body. Dr. John Sarno, even though he didn't realize it at the time, was talking about very much the same thing. He was a physician who wanted to know, as a back surgeon, he wanted to know what was the most useful part of the surgeries he did. And when he did research, he found out that there was nothing about his surgeries that were responsible for people's healing. How could that be? Well, because some people, when he did the surgeries, they got better and they had complete elimination of pain and complete restoration of motion, and some people didn't. And no matter how many x-rays and scans they did, they couldn't find a reason for why some people had complete elimination of pain and restoration of motion and other people didn't. So he undertook some research. And what he found was, out of, I forget whether it was 200 or 2,000 sets of scans of people's bodies and their spine, and all these scans had problems on the spine. They had arthritis, they had bone spurs, they had curvature of the spine, they had subluxations, they had pinched nerves, they had, bulging, herniated and ruptured discs, they had the whole list of things. But only 35% of the people who had that on their x-rays and their scans reported any pain or restriction of motion, which led him to the rather shocking conclusion that there was nothing on those scans that was responsible for the pain and restriction of motion. Because 65% of the people that have those things on their scans have no pain and no restriction of motion. What does that mean? How could that be? What it means is something else must be responsible for the restriction of motion and the pain that people are experiencing. Dr. Sarno got busy studying, at a deeper level, the physiology and the blood flow and the nerve flow. Neural syndrome is just a word for what happens when mental emotional tension in the body, in the mind, is lodged in the body someplace and affects the tissue such that it causes constriction of certain muscle groups and it pinches off the flow of oxygen to tissue. And what he discovered was that a very slight reduction in blood flow, I think it's 10% for a very short period of time, is enough to initiate excruciating physical pain. So instead of doing surgeries anymore, he went to a psychoeducational model, and instead of having a success rate in the 30% range, he started having a success rate in the 80 and 90% range. And he didn't do surgery anymore. He simply started educating people about this tension myoneural syndrome and how the vast majority of back pain is related to mental emotional stress or conflict, internal conflict, avoidance, tension, guilt, shame, rage. In one of his books, he said that the vast majority of low back pain is due to unconscious rage. So he got active in teaching people about the process of the mental, emotional energies that we all experience and store in our bodies in different ways. And he told them, this is far more what's responsible for your physical pain than anything that's going on in your body physically. And when you quit training your body to believe that it's a physical problem and you start working with the mental, emotional issues, you get relief like you just cannot get if all you do is address the physical symptoms. That is the nocebo effect in spades. That is, his work essentially says that the vast majority of low back pain is the nocebo effect. It is our mental, emotional tensions carried in our body that is constricting the blood flow to tissue and causing excruciating pain. And as somebody who's personally had back pain for a lot of years and done all of the things the physical therapists, the orthopedic surgeons, the chiropractors, the massage therapists have told me to do, and been caught in that loop of focusing on the physical and then getting exposed to Dr. Sarno's work and eventually finding the courage in myself to let go of all of those physical manipulations and treatments, I am a walking example of the truth and the benefits of paying attention to the tension myoneural syndrome and to the mental emotional issues that were causing my physical pain and restriction of motion for over 20 years. So, if there's anything about this that's striking you as interesting, there are two books. One is, there's a whole series of books by Dr. John Sarno, but the other book by Eric Vance is called Suggestible You. And if you look into that and you are willing to experiment with your own mental, emotional issues, if you're willing to engage in tools like Michael and Jeannie make available at whyagain.org, you will probably join the ranks of people who are amazed at the difference and the improvement in your quality of life. And that's at the physical, at the mental, and the emotional level. There really aren't any words for how much better a person's life can be when he or she understands there is no separation between mind and body. And when he or she understands that there is a powerful, powerful, powerful aspect of their minds that functions outside their conscious awareness. Many, many, probably millions of times more powerful than our conscious mind is the mind that we do not get access to directly, that we cannot track because there's so much going on with it. And as Michael Ryce likes to say, quoting Harvard research, that in any given moment we are probably...
There's this nerve that starts to lose tone, and we could actually stimulate this nerve by doing these rhythmic breathing exercises. And we could start communicating with our brain through these rhythms to tell our brain that everything is safe, and how we could actually improve digestion.
And that, and hopefully that will yield some interesting material. Also, Mr. Dale Allen Hoffman has begun his, I think it's an 8-week course that began on Saturday, talking about the ancient Aramaic words and principles. And he has a friend from the UK who's joining him, one of his proteges. And I mentioned it before that if you have any interest, you can follow him on Facebook. You can go to DaleAllenHoffman.com. It's not too late to get tapped into that. Very, very useful material, slightly different ways to look at a fundamental level, how your energy system, beginning with the breath, they started with the breath, which is core to your life force, how your energy system works and how you might use it, have intentional focus that will be a dramatic positive impact on changing your experience of life. And I think I was saying it just yesterday that when you read about the breath, you can get intellectual knowledge about the breath, but unless you actually start doing some breathing techniques, Michael and Jeannie were talking about this yesterday, and they had their still point breathing session set up over the weekend. Unless you're intentionally using your breath, you don't get the benefits of it. Unless you consciously monitor your breath and notice how many times I move my arm. And I looked over and she was spinning her hand and fist over her head backwards, and basically her elbow almost touching her ear. It's a complete range of motion in her arm. And I said, yeah, I can see that. And she said, no, you don't understand. I said, what do you mean? She said, I haven't been able to move my hand above my shoulder in over 12 years. Now, of course, some of the people in the group were thinking, oh my gosh, it's a miracle healing. But even at that time, before I knew about the tension myoneural syndrome, I just told her, no, what happened was you released some tension that was probably pinching a nerve when you tried to move your arm. And when we release the mental, emotional tension, it has an impact on our experience of what we call the physical body, which, as we know, it isn't solid, it isn't physical the way we think of it. And the more we move into this awareness, appreciation, and then actual practice of tools that can help modify those energies, the emotions, the thoughts, the beliefs, etc., the more we move into that, the better our lives get. And, it doesn't matter to the actual implementation of this, whether you say, like if somebody was applying today's Course in Miracles lesson from the workbook, they might say, I'm going to turn my life over to God. I'm going to turn my mind over to the Holy Spirit. I'm going to ask to be shown. It doesn't matter whether you talk about it in those phrases and words and concepts, or you say, I'm going to look for the blessing in this. Or you say, I'm going to look for the positive side. I'm going to imagine that everything that happens in my life, even if it goes directly against what I wanted to have happen today, I'm going to look at it as though it's happening for me rather than to me. And in that way, whatever phrasing, whatever concepts you want to wrap around it, when you make that positive change, when you turn the filter towards the positive, when you ask to be shown, when you turn the focus inside when there's upset, for each and every one of these things, your life will get better. It may not get better instantly. It may not get better in the way you want it to get better, because your conscious logical mind is a master of coming up with what it thinks it needs based on 9 bits of data when there's, 20 trillion bits of data hitting your senses. So, essentially it's like, I hope my conscious logical mind doesn't get to drive the bus when I have an upset, because that would be like a 3-year-old getting to determine everything that happens in their life. But a 3-year-old who has no concept of electricity and the danger there, has no concept of the sharp knife and how much damage it can do to the tissue, it has no concept of poisons, it has no concept of, the need for specific nutrients. So a 3-year-old, with its impulses, has a tiny fraction of the understanding of what will keep it safe, him or her safe and healthy, compared to what a good parent can do for that child. Well, that's the same as what my conscious logical mind, it's analogous in my mind to me wanting everything that my conscious logical mind wants and pushing away or rejecting what actually happens in life every time it's not in alignment with what my conscious logical mind wants. My conscious logical mind can't possibly know how the events that unfold in my life today are going to work out better than I could have possibly imagined. It can't know, especially when it has a negative emotional response to something, because that's when the filter of distortion comes over my perception. And whatever picture shows up in my mind is nothing like accurate. It is so partial, it's so minuscule compared to the totality of life unfolding in that moment. So everything I can do to move into what the Course in Miracles would talk about and what Way of Mastery talks about in its lesson number 5, the Keys to the Kingdom, everything I can do to move into, to align my energy of intention and focus with the creative energy, with the energy of creation, and then keeping my intention focused on that during the day. And then moving into allowance, which for me, my mind makes sense of that in terms of watching for the early warning signs of resistance, tension, judgment, bitterness, hurt, etc., and releasing the resistance. That's what I believe, that's what makes the most sense to me from that lesson in terms of allowance. And then I move into surrender, which means I ask to be taught. I assume that despite the fact that my conscious logical mind says this is bad, this is wrong, this shouldn't be happening, if it's happening, it's going to be leading to things that are better than my conscious logical mind could even ever predict. And it may not be in the conscious logical realm, in the next moment, in my life the way I want it to, and yet this is what synchronicity, this is what the little miracles. This is what the flow of life is all about. And if I can soften and release my need to be right and move into allowance and surrender, my life will start unfolding in ways that are many, many, many times better than I could ever have imagined or predicted. And that's what we're here to support people in doing. And we've got about 22 minutes left. Our call-in number is 563-999-3581. And we have plenty of time for a conversation. If you call that number and press 1, we can entertain your comments, your questions, your suggestions for topics. I have the privilege of announcing that we have a support group again tonight from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time. All the information for joining us there, it's absolutely free if you want to join us, is at mindshiftersacademy.org. And I should also mention that the On Your Mind podcast, hosted by Journey Stream, today published the interview I did with Robert Whitaker, and they chose to title it On Rethinking Psychiatry to Address Mental Health Issues. He is the author of 2 books, Mad in America, at least these 2 that are most relevant to what we're talking about, and Anatomy of an Epidemic. And it was an honor to interview him, and that went live today. You can find that at journeysdream.org/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. Area code 541, you're in the air. Who do we have?
Yes, Celinda.
Hello, Celinda. How are you?
I am fine, and your subject today has been absolutely right on, and I wanted to share a learning I had this morning, what I consider a download, in light of what you said.
All right, what's that?
And that is, you mentioned Louise Hay, and you can heal your life, and you can heal your body. And you mentioned one other, Dr. Sarno. And I woke up this morning. I have been dealing with candida all my life and didn't know, and I have the fungal form of it from everything I can ascertain. And I realize now that it's come down our family line. And this morning when I woke up, I had read Louise Hay, and her possible thought pattern was that candidiasis is feeling very scattered, lots of frustration and anger, demanding and untrusting in relationships, and great takers. And I have been working with this over the years in an attempt to discern what that really meant to me. And this morning when I woke up, this little thought entered my head that candidiasis is a disease of feeling controlled or having to control. And it just blew me out of the bed almost. And that is so central to these experiences we are having individually and collectively as a result of this COVID pandemic. And I just thought I'd share that with you because now I have an insight that I can act upon and go right back into the Aramaic gospel and pay attention to my mind rather than obsessing over the body's non-working, quote unquote. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Okay, and so the issue is either controlling or feeling like you're being controlled, right?
Well, I would put and rather than or, because I have come to the perception that one is controlling, one has actually given his or her power away and is in effect as controlled as the thing or person that person is trying to control.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense, and it fits right into what we've been talking about last week, beginning last Monday, and then a couple times through the week, that any time I choose to focus on a goal I have no control over, I will begin to feel the negative emotional states that go with that, feeling out of control, feeling angry, feeling scared, etc. And that is going to distort my perception. That is going to start showing me pictures that are false. And as long as I operate, as long as I speak and act when those false pictures are active in my mind, I'm going to get further and further entrenched in the misery, in the upset. And then
or being controlled.
Well, yeah, we aren't born in a vacuum. The tabula rasa that they thought, the blank slate that they thought we're born with as humans are pretty clear that that's just not the case. There's a lot of room for conditioning and training, etc., but it is not a blank slate. There's all kinds of energetic patterns that we get from our bloodline. There's all kinds of differences, one of us to the other, that are going to influence how any 2 or 3 or 12 of us who are standing in a room together, even if we're infants, how we're going to react to a single simple stimulus in that room. It is not a blank slate.
I so appreciate your perspective and all of the sharing that you've given. For example, you're mentioning Bruce Lipton. I just feel that all of us souls in our soul journeys are being lighted up. And we explain it, as you said, in a language that makes sense to us. That might have been Greg Braden. I'm sorry, I was listening to him this morning. That we say it in the language that we're familiar with, that we're steeped in. But the essence is still there. When we get the brain cells for the essence, I feel like the holy breath just works without any limitation, and will take whatever opening is possible to build those brain cells for each one of us.
Well, I would have to agree on many levels that there are all kinds of different ways to talk about it, but it's the same process going for all of us. So is there anything else we can support you with today?
No, I just had that desire to share with you and our family that listens to your show and Michael and Jeannie's show. Again, the grid that is being formed here, this web of family all over the world that's just popping awake one by one is so encouraging and so harmonizing for me to focus on that I just wanted to share with you today my appreciation once again.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and you are most welcome and deserving. Thank you for listening, and I'm glad it's of benefit. Blessings.
Blessings. I'll keep you posted.
I would hope you will. So we have about 13 minutes left. 563-999-3581. You can suggest a topic or ask a question or suggest an author. I have put out a request to interview a gentleman who is going to be doing a summit for not Parkinson's, but Alzheimer's. It's a 3-day thing. This is a gentleman who has developed a brain tap device that uses sound, binaural sound, and lights, and they're going to just be discussing different ways to help the brain function better and reverse or prevent Alzheimer's. So I will keep you posted. I will be participating. Get the benefits of all the knowledge that you can accrue by reading about breath work. So we're encouraging people to, I think Michael said yesterday he's going to be doing, maybe once a month, he's going to be doing a still point breathing workshop. That's really, really powerful, really useful. And there's all kinds of other knowledge about the breath, which, if you apply it, can make a substantial positive change in your life. So we have about 10 minutes left. 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. How can we support you today? What is on your mind? What would be of use for you, for us to do in this next 10 minutes prior to our second hour coming up? We have talked so far about 2 different general topics and books, and a third one that I'll mention is I'm working on the book Difficult Conversations. The subtitle is How to Discuss What Matters Most. And this is a book that's written by people who are part of the project at Harvard Law School. And they had there's another book that's well known from this group that's related to, a similar topic, edition 10 years after the first edition. They want to leave the main text intact, but they've chosen to draw on what they've learned from the people who are using the book over the last 10 years. And they have 10 questions that people ask about different difficult conversations that have emerged over the last 10 years. And the other book by this Harvard negotiation project was called Getting to Yes. And that one has sold more than 3 million copies. And so what they're trying to do is present us with a set of tools for having the difficult conversations, whether it's personal or work-related or business or family, and, you know, that it's their hope is that they empower people to engage rather than shut down and run away from difficult conversations. And, you know, topics in the chapters, headings like stop arguing about who's right and explore each other's stories. And then the next one is don't assume that they meant what you took from it. Disentangle their intention from the impact that you take from it. And then the fourth one is basically my bottom line observation number 2, which is abandon blame. My bottom line observation number 2 says, I've seen kindergarten-age children that are expert at blaming, and I've never seen blame lead to the productive or constructive resolution to a problem. So they're in agreement. Blame is useless, so abandon it. And then they go on to outline ways that their research-based studies have demonstrated that it's possible to have the difficult conversations and have productive results. Their definition of a difficult conversation is anything you find it difficult to talk about. You know, some people will have some topics that they're completely free and easy talking about. I was in one of my sessions today, somebody talked about getting a text message from somebody that was all about sex, you know, the guttural type sex. There's a person who routinely sends this patient of mine what most people would call raw, guttural, nasty, crude text messages referencing sexuality. And yet that very same person won't go to an AA meeting that he knows about where the topic is deep stuff about family issues. He won't go. He will not talk about his family of origin. He won't talk about his emotional burdens and stuck points. So some people can talk about sex. Some people can talk about politics, but they can't talk about sex. Some people can talk about finances, but they won't talk about politics, or they won't talk about sex. Every one of us has topic areas that are loaded with our history and our trauma energy and our fears that make it difficult for us to discuss. And so here's a book based on research that says there are ways to discuss what matters most and get good results. So we'll be exploring that and the learnings I take from that book in the next few weeks. And again, I throw it open as a standing request. What's a book that you'd like to see us review, read, or interview the author of? I have a request out to Richard Moss, who was recommended by, I think it was Ellen who recommended Richard Moss, and some of his books that are about the very same kinds of things that we're discussing on Mindshifters Radio. And he's a medical doctor who, I think he retired from practice and started getting into the psychological/spiritual side of things. And we've talked about his books related to happiness and mandalas and meditation, actually making positive, proactive changes in your life. So I'm assuming for most people listening to a show like this, the title of that book was The Mandala of Being, Discovering the Power of Awareness by Richard Moss. And the other one was Inside Out Healing, Transforming Your Life Through the Power of Presence. And I was going to say, I'm assuming that most people that tune into a show like this, you have your own favorite podcasts. You have your own authors, those podcasts, those leads. And you can send that to me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. Alternatively, you can email Jeannie at jeanie@yagain.org. And that's a great thing to do because then we'll address it to the best of our ability in the call, and these are recorded and it'll be available in the archive. So even if you're not there the next day or two or a week later when we get around to answering it, it'll be available in the archives. So I thank you all for being here. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Welcome, Jeannie Ryce.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. Appreciate you. I caught the last two books. I'll go back and re-listen so I can note those books in the notes for today.
The other one was Eric Vance, Eric with a K, Vance, V-A-N-C-E. His book is Suggestible You. suggestible you is about the placebo effect and the nocebo effect. And then the other thing we were just talking about, Dr. John Sarno, because he's so related to that power of the mind on the body.
Right. Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right. Blessings. Have a wonderful show.
Thank you.